Was I wrong about Kenneth Marshall? Hello there, and welcome to another video, where today I'm going to be talking about how reading Mickey 7 affected my opinion on the movie Mickey 17. So, a few weeks ago, I put out a video talking about how Mickey 17's insistence on plugging political ideology disadvantaged what could have been an incredible sci-fi story. Full video by clicking the card. And this video led to a lot of discourse in the comments, with some really interesting points being made. However, the comment that piqued my interest the most, and led directly to today's video, came from Mackenzie Mackenzie Frato 4186, who said, "I'd like to add to the conversation the perspective of someone who read the book this movie was based off of, Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. Mickey 7 focuses a lot more on Mickey and his internal experience with being a double. The wife of Marshall doesn't exist in the novel, and Marshall himself is a regular, stoic villain, rather than being a caricature. I took Marshall as being more a critique of populism, and even Elon Musk, more than Trump. Remember the speech impediment? The themes of colonialism are much less present in the novel as well. However, the novel is just nowhere near as interesting as the movie. I finished reading it around the time this video was posted, and have barely thought about it since. The movie deals with the conflict and personality of the doubles better, the implications of colonizing a planet with sentient creatures already living there, and the ethics of expendables. I don't know if Mickey 17 will be forgotten in 5 years, but for me, it has given me a lot to chew on. I also like Bong Joon-Ho as a director. Mickey 7 reminded me why I like movies and books to have a position, whether I agree or disagree with it. Obviously, you couldn't know the content of the novel without reading it, but you might like it more than I did based on the kind of sci-fi that seems to appeal to you. If you did read it, I'd be very interested in your thoughts contrasting the movie to the book." Well, Mackenzie, I've finally finished the book, and I've got to say, it's definitely changed my mind. To a degree. When contrasting Mickey 7 and Mickey 17, I found something really interesting. Reading the novel made me appreciate the things I loved about the movie even more. And it made me even more disappointed by the things I didn't like. Mackenzie pointed out that Mickey is a lot more introspective about being a double in the book than he is in the film. And that is absolutely true. But the film adds a fascinating layer by giving Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 really distinct personalities. There's a moment in the novel where Mickey says he feels like he truly dies, and a different man sees through his eyes after each resurrection. But in the book, there are no real personality differences between versions, so the idea doesn't quite land. Especially because the movie implied that every Mickey kind of came out slightly different, but that Mickey 18 was the most different from the original personality. And it's pretty much like this across the board. A lot of the interesting ideas brought forward in the novel had small, little changes added in the film that just elevated them to a better place. That said, the film also adds subplots that drag the pacing and distract from the core narrative, while the novel remains far more focused. So in terms of just straight structure and pacing, the novel does win out for me. It's really funny, I find myself agreeing a lot with Mackenzie. The novel is far less compelling than the film. I even found myself preferring the way the movie ended, with Mickey 18 making the conscious choice to sacrifice himself to kill Marshall and appease the creepers, rather than him just being eaten by them, and Mickey 7 kind of just tricking everyone into a false sense of mutually assured destruction. The movie version just hits so much harder. The creepers themselves are handled much better in the movie, giving them a distinct personality and care for one another that wasn't present in the book at all. And, while this does kind of contrast well with how Mickey is as an expendable, I feel like the same comparison was achieved while allowing the creepers to have more depth in the film. That being said, some of the broader sci-fi world building just lands better in the novel. The history of Earth, the Bubble War, and why humanity expanded into the stars that's all just fleshed out so much better. I mean, the bubble war pretty much decimated Earth and is the reason humanity expanded into the stars, but is also the reason why Earth is left isolated and ignored. And I mean, the reason why doubles are outlawed, it's just way more compelling. In the film, Alan Manikova uses the process to murder a few homeless people. And don't get me wrong, that is bad. But in the book, he exploits an entire planet's political instability to clone himself en masse and take over, requiring a literal nuclear orbital bombardment to stop him from spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. Now that's a reason to outlaw doubling, and something the film just really fails to get across. There's also the idea of colonizing a planet with sentience on it already, and the history of humanity's attempts to do so being handled just so much better in the book. But again, I preferred the novel's final status quo rather than the movies. And that's kind of my ultimate feeling towards these two pieces of media. I find myself in a constant, tug of war over small details done better or worse in either the novel or the film that swings my opinion one way or another. I will say though, it has definitely deepened the appreciation I already had for Bong Joon-Ho. But, did reading the novel really change how I viewed Kenneth Marshall? Now, a very common idea, echoing throughout the comments section of my last Mickey 17 video, was the idea that Kenneth Marshall was a critique on populism, far more than he was a critique of Trump, as I'd stated. And honestly, that's a murky distinction. In a lot of cases, it's really hard to separate Trump from the broader populist wave he represents. Now, having said that, I'm still not so sure that I agree with Mackenzie's interpretation that Kenneth Marshall was more Musk-based than Trump-based. And look, I'm not American, so it would be fair to say I might be missing some nuance, but I think Trump's position as a head of state, someone responsible for an entire population, feels more aligned with Marshall's role. Trump, as President of the United States, holds a massive position of authority over his citizens, and he's responsible for dictating policy and the general sentiment of his government, whether you like him or not. And this is similar to Kenneth Marshall, who's effectively leading the colonizing expedition, and is in charge of the various rules that govern the colonists, as well as the general direction of his own government structure, for lack of a better word, and he holds direct authority. And sure, while you could draw parallels between Marshall and Musk, owing to the latter's position as a CEO, I personally think Musk would more so fall under the banner of kind of one of the higher-ups around Marshall. Someone who wields a lot of influence and political power, but is still answerable to Marshall himself. But, putting all of that aside, did reading the novel change my thoughts on Kenneth Marshall as he was portrayed in the movie? And the answer is yes. Marshall in the novel is very much a one-note character with very little to distinguish his particular brand of villainy from anyone else's. Mickey 17 gives him some character and memorability that just isn't present in the novel. There's an attempt to give him some backstory and characteristics that take him out of the realm of one-note generic military villain. But his parody nature still remains. I appreciate what Bong Joon-Ho was going for and trying to do with the character, but I'd still appreciate a bit more subtlety and nuance rather than what we got. Having said that, I take the parody over what we were given in the novel any day of the week. Kenneth Marshall in the book really has nothing going for him in terms of memorability, and while I really didn't like Mark Ruffalo's portrayal, it was infinitely more memorable than what we were given in the book. I just wish he'd done some things differently. So, to answer the question this title posed, was I wrong about Kenneth Marshall? Maybe not entirely, but reading the book definitely shifted my perspective. What it really showed me, though, is kind of how adaptation is just an art of balance. Mickey 17 doesn't always hit that balance. Sometimes it adds depth, sometimes it loses it. But it made me think harder about the role of interpretation in sci-fi storytelling. The book gave me context, but the movie did give me a spark. And somewhere between them lies a version of the story I wish we'd gotten. One that maybe keeps the pace of the novel, the character depth of the film, and the best of both of their ideas. But who knows? Maybe that's the point. Great sci-fi doesn't always give you all the answers. Sometimes just gives you enough to keep asking better questions. But was Mickey 17 great sci-fi? Yeah, I don't know. I think reading the novel did definitely make me appreciate Mickey 17 more than I had, but a lot of my criticisms kind of still remain the same. But I mean, the questions it brings up on adaptation are really interesting, and it's one of the reasons I would love to dive into like the Lord of the Rings and like translating the book to screen and all that. To be honest with you, though, I don't know if that's a video that I ever make because just the idea itself terrifies me. I don't know if I am qualified enough. Like, I love Tolkien so much. I love the movies and what they did. I don't know if I can talk in an unbiased way, you know?